And lastly, the Northern Cape at 637,000 registrations. The gender demographic remains the same, with 55% of all persons on the voters' roll being women and 44% being male. In terms of the age breakdown, the biggest age category on the voters' roll is ages 30 to 39 at 6.7 million, followed by 40 to 49-year-olds at 5.9 million. And persons in ages 50 to 59, it's 4.5 million. The young persons in ages 20 to 29, it's 4.1 million. We plan to build on these successes and urge all South Africans to make use of this weekend to register for the elections. We further urge eligible voters to visit the registration stations to inspect or update their registration details or do so online. The voter registration weekend will have over 69,000 staff members who have been recruited and trained. The recruitment criteria for electoral staff was conceived in consultation with the National Party Liaison Committee. The names of trained staff has also been shared with the municipal party liaison committees to facilitate objections against those staff that are deemed unsuitable in the light of the recruitment criteria. Out of the appointed staff, 53,000 are female and 16,000 are male. In addition, 35,000 registration staff are under the age of 35, whilst 26 are between ages 36 and 50. The balance of the 7,000 are people who are 51 years old and above. But crucially, 50,000 of the total staff complement are unemployed persons. Now, quite an important matter. Our collective goal as a nation is to ensure that every one of the eligible voters in the country is registered to vote in the forthcoming election. It is therefore apposite that ahead of the second registration weekend, we remind voters of the general rule applicable in elections. That is, a person votes at the voting station where they are registered. The only exception to the rule is that a voter may vote outside of the voting district of registration only if they first notify the Commission by a date which will be regulated by the election timetable. The need for this prior notification is new and comes about as a result of the changes to the law. Details of the modalities of this notification will be outlined after the registration weekend. On electoral infrastructure for the second registration weekend, the Commission wishes to indicate the following. Lease agreements for permanent voting stations have been signed and concluded. And of these permanent voting stations, there is 62% are schools, 9.7% are places of worship, and the balance of 28 include other categories such as community halls and other municipal facilities. There are a further 959 temporary voting stations across the country. The majority of temporary voting stations are found in this province of Gauteng at 204, followed by the Free State at 180 and Limpopo at 150. Procurement processes concerning the provision of temporary infrastructure have also been concluded. The implementation of temporary infrastructure ensures that electoral services reach even those communities who do not yet have public amenities. Temporary voting stations are therefore an important mechanism of extending franchise to all citizens. There are 33 mobile stations across the country. The success of the first registration weekend was, in the main, because of the efficiencies brought about by the voter management devices. The VMD, as we indicated earlier, is the mainstay technology for the delivery of the registration process. Once again, 3 business applications will be running on the VMDs during the forthcoming weekend. And these are the staff attendance register, where we record the presence of staff at voting stations and also use same application to facilitate contracts and their payment. 2 is the voting station monitoring system. That system indicates whether the voting station is opened, what time it opened, and at what time did it close. And lastly will be the voter registration application, which is the system that is used to collect the registration of those who seek applications at the voting station. The devices are designed to operate online via a secure private cellular data connection. However, all 3 applications have been coded to function fully without access to the network, and what we generally call the offline mode. And that is if certain predetermined parameters are met. This includes instances where there is insufficient connectivity with the data center. The interplay between the online and offline modes of the devices will happen without operator intervention. I think it's the security services trying to secure the voters' roll.
Okay.
The international segment of the voters' roll for out-of-country registrations stood at 18,000 South Africans ahead of the registration we had this past weekend. Following the registration weekend for out-of-country citizens, this segment of the roll now stands to continue via the online registration process that the Commission has developed and which is accessible through the Commission website. Just to give you an indication of the 5 topmost missions with the highest registrations, it's the UK London mission with 9,373, the Netherlands, The Hague, 2,855, Dublin in Ireland, 1,306, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, 1,090, Canberra in Australia, 1,075. It is crucially important for each voter to check where they are registered. This is more acute in the light of the general rule that a voter must vote at the voting station at which that voter is registered. To check, there are a number of channels that can be used. The first, our contact center, which is fully operational, which can be reached on 0800 11 8000. Secondly, you can SMS your identity number to 32810, and the website has a MI registered facility through which can be used for purposes of verifying one's registration. Fourthly, we have an app which can also be used to check whether you are registered. And lastly, our WhatsApp line can now also be used to check whether a person's registration remains intact. And our WhatsApp chatbot is 0800 88 0000. It is your democracy, owned it, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, SCO, for the update. Feels like we're in full mode for voter registration weekend. I'm going to allow questions from the floor. Introduce yourself and the media house you belong to. Thank you very much. Okay, let's proceed. Let me check if there are any other hands, please. I see we see at the back, Junior. So it's 1, 2, 3. I'm sitting at 3, I'm correct in it? David is 3. Yeah, I've seen Busi there at the bottom. Thank you very much. Let's start from the top and then proceed downwards.
Okay, thank you. It's Natasha Pri here from SABC News. Just looking at the figures that decide of the expats, the South Africans that voted overseas, and we just came from prison. The numbers are now up of prisoners who are interested to vote. There seems to be a greater interest in people who are actually eager to vote. Is the IEC satisfied with this? And I mean, what sort of indication are we getting from the general public about voting this year? Also, in regards with the prison, the online voter registration, obviously prisoners aren't allowed to have phones, but in terms of that, I was speaking to the commissioner earlier on, it seems as if a lot of them actually voted online. So do IEC officials actually go to these prisoners with your own devices? What actually happens? The last time we spoke to you, you had said that the IEC would promise a better voter registration weekend this time around. And I know that you're working very close with the auspices of NatJoins to make sure there's no repeat of what happened last time in terms of the protests. So will there be enough security assigned to various voting stations to actually ensure that the last incidences that we saw last time aren't repeated? And then, sorry, just the last one from me in this round. In terms of the countries where there was conflicts, some of your embassies were closed, Sudan, Israel, and another country, I think it was Russia, Ukraine, yes. Did the IEC pick up any issues in terms of your online voter registration with South Africans that actually live in that country? Thank you.
Junior Kumalo from Newsroom Africa. Just to add on the question that my colleague Natasha just asked on the protests that we saw happening at during the last voter registration, it seems like it's the same communities that keep protesting and disrupting the voter registration. Has there been any plan that has been put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again? And the second question is with regards to the stations that had voter registration stations that had challenges last time around. We remember the one at the Union buildings. There were no ablution facilities. The tent itself was half constructed. Even in Tembisa, there were also some of those challenges that were experienced. What has the IEC done differently when it comes to this voter registration weekend? And lastly, there has been comments by the former President Jacob Zuma with regards to the IEC possibly being biased towards the ANC. The ANC has strongly basically rubbished these comments, but we just wanted to get a comment from the IEC on what this does to voter sentiment. We know that a lot of South Africans have been apathetic when it comes to voting. Does such comments by a senior leader, someone who was a former president, affect the IEC standing? Thank you.
Katlego Sekgotho from Kaya 959, CEO. What is being done in terms of preparations ahead of the weekend in natural disaster struck regions? We know some parts of Gauteng have experienced floods as well as in KZN. In terms of the voters outside of South Africa, particularly in countries like Israel, Sudan, conflict-ridden areas, South Africans who are looking to vote there, have there been discussions with those citizens, and what does that look like, particularly in those conflict-ridden countries? As well as just another one in terms of logistics. Can people with temporary IDs vote, and do they have to go to Home Affairs first?
Busichi Mombe from the SABC. I'd like to find out, there's been a significant jump in terms of expats who have registered. You said from 18,000 to 29,000. To what do you attribute this? Is this just about the fact that there's now online? The second question I have is that the right to vote is not universal. There are many countries where it's either not allowed if you are a convicted criminal or it's limited. What would you say to people in South Africa who believe that prisoners shouldn't be allowed to vote? And then my last question is also related to prisoners. I'd like to find out, particularly with the fact that there are going to be independents now voting, there's going to be a third, not voting, contesting, there's now going to be a third ballot and all of that. What are you doing to ensure that that category of voters is up to date in terms of what is required of them and how to vote?
Thank you very much. I'm going to allow the CEO to deal with the questions, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you. Commissioner Love will be dealing with the first batch of questions. Thank you very much, Commissioner Love.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and group the questions together. With regard to voters abroad, there has been an increase in interest. I think that is true generally, but also for voters abroad. However, I do think that the possibility for voters abroad to be able to use the app and to go online has assisted many of those voters, and I think we've seen that response. The second thing is that there have been some questions in relation to the three jurisdictions where the International Relations Department has indicated that for security reasons, these will not be open. And that is something that is truly beyond our control. It is something that is legally enshrined in terms of the locations where voting can take place. And, although time is marching on and the window of between May and August is coming closer, it is certainly our hope that those three jurisdictions will not remain closed. But that's not something that we're in a position to be able to control. Regarding the question of prisoners, first of all, again, I think the increase in interest is reflected amongst that population. I think also the Department of Correctional Services has shown a willingness to engage in with ourselves in order to ensure that there is an increase in the outreach and education of potential voters, and I think that that has had an effect. The online registration process is supported by the IEC officials in the sense of using the VMD, and to the extent that it's possible before the date of proclamation, where some of the prisoners, for example, did not have their IDs. There will be steps taken by the different provincial officers to ensure that all kinds of support are made available wherever possible. The right to vote for prisoners is something that is, again, something enshrined in law. It is something that this country has decided, both in terms of the constitutional decision and subsequently in terms of the very clear amendments to the Electoral Act. However, because the prisoner population is located in the manner that it is, prisoners are not able to be voting in various components of the elections, and so some of the issues around independent candidates, although they will receive the education about what is happening there, they, like voters abroad, will vote in the national elections. With regard to the protests, the security, the natural disasters, and so on, there has been some very active cooperation and coordination between the officials from the Commission and the Nat Joints, both at national level but also at the provincial and more local level. In addition to that, the processes that the Commission has had in place for some time around conflict resolution and mediation have been stepped up, and certainly where we are aware that there are areas of tension, there has been, those areas have been identified, and there have been agreements about additional steps that will be taken. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be able to be predictable. It certainly doesn't mean that all of those conflicts will necessarily be resolved. But we do hope very, very strongly that the citizens of this country will be able to not just use the opportunity to identify what their problems are, but in doing so, recognize the importance of the voting process, the registration process, if they want to change something. And so it's really important for any citizens to not just make additional efforts to register, but also to respect the importance of voting and registration of others. There was a question in relation to the comments that have been made by the former president, Mr. Zuma, in relation to the Commission having been biased. I think what we would say to any political party, and that includes the unrepresented political parties, is that as soon as a political party is part of the process for an upcoming election, they are also part of the process of joining with the Commission to ensure that the elections are managed in a way that is free and fair. The Commission has received absolutely no evidence of bias and rejects this kind of talk that attempts to really inject into our country almost an insurrectionist mood. It is unacceptable, it's undemocratic, and we invite every political contestant, whether it be a person who is coming from a political party or a person who is an independent candidate, to recognize that part of being a candidate is to join, accept responsibility for making these elections a success, and that it is entirely irresponsible as a citizen to try and undermine a process rather than to enable it. I think I've covered all of the questions, and I'm sure that the CEO may have something to add.
The issue of the temporary identification certificate, is it competent for registration? Yes, it is, issued by the Department of Home Affairs. It is similarly competent for purposes of voting, if it's issued by the Department of Home Affairs. The VMDs and the prisoners, yes, indeed, we took into the prisons our voter management devices and operated them there. Of course, it's a security institution, and there are certain protocols that we have had to observe. But overall, that process is working well. The partnership with correctional services is holding well, and those prisoners who are willing, who have IDs, are coming in their numbers to register, and that can only gratify the Commission. Thanks.
Areas that experience national disasters?
Yeah, of course, we're working with the disaster management in those affected provinces. We are also working with the infrastructure task teams in the affected areas to ensure that we are able to restore to an operational condition infrastructure that was destroyed. If such is impossible, then we set up a temporary infrastructure, even as we accept that temporary infrastructure does present some intractable challenges. Now, the issue of the half tent and whatever at the Union Building, be mindful that sometimes it's very hot, and it's a conscious decision not to cover the sides. Not that there's no sides of a tent that have been organized. It's just that due to the very pernicious temperatures that we sometimes experience, people elect to not to use the sides of the tent. Our pollution facilities, every provincial office of the IC has been given sufficient resources to secure the temporary infrastructure necessary for all the 950 odd temporary voting stations across the country. We've just had a discussion with provincial electoral officers this morning, and all indications are that all the necessary has been done to establish temporary infrastructure, which they'll start erecting on Friday.
Thank you, CEO and Commissioner Love. Let me take the last round of questions. Thank you very much. Okay, let's start from the top again, and then we'll proceed down. I see two hands. Natasha, we'll start with you, and then we'll take the rest of the hands. Thank you.
Thanks, House Kate. Just two other questions. Junior touched on it, but it's just to do with the case that's before the Electoral Court, where the ANC has taken the MK to the Electoral Court over the trademark. That is, the last time you had said that the IEC has to go and present its own case and defend its actions before the Electoral Court. Have you done so? And if you can divulge to members of the media what the IEC said in its defense. Another matter that's before the ConCourt is the issue of signatures. We know that last year the ConCourt ruled that independents need 1,000 signatures in order to contest, and of course the issue of Imali. But this time around, is there a general understanding from unrepresented parties about that whole 15%? And also, Mr. Mamabolo, the last time we spoke to you again, you had said that you're going to leave the platform open for political parties to actually continue with the process of signatures. How has that process been so far? Thank you.
Okay, let's proceed. Thank you, Sisi.
Okay, thanks, Oscar. My name is Mikulu from ENCA. I'm not sure who this is to, but in terms of the 29,000 expats that have registered to vote, I think according to Stats SA, the actual number of South Africans living abroad is about 2 million. So just in terms of that 29,000 versus the 2 million, do we know why there is such a big disparity and why there isn't an uptick of registering and what the picture is in terms of that. Then in terms of those 3 missions in the Ukraine, Israel and Sudan, I know last week, I think Commissioner Love said that they were encouraging, the IEC is encouraging people in those regions to vote. To register, sorry, are they registering to vote anyway? And then just in terms of the ideal numbers that the IEC is looking for, if there's just over 27 million that are registered to vote, and I think the number of eligible voters is hovering at around 40 million, that's still a big number of people that aren't registered to vote. Again, do we know why? What's the breakdown of those numbers? Why people aren't registering? What the plan is around those the 10 million essentially over the next, just over 10 million over the next few months while they can register to vote. And then maybe just lastly, in terms of the IEC and the work that you have, the mushrooming of political parties that are registering, does that make things more complicated for your work? Does it not? Just your thoughts on the increase in the number of parties that are out there?
I hope I'm not missing any question from the back. I've got a bit of waves. All right, let's proceed.
Yeah, I'm Eric Naki from the Citizen. I would like to know from the Commission how many independent candidates have registered or have come forward to you. Perhaps if you can give them at what level have they registered, national, provincial, regional? Thank you very much.
Have I covered everybody? Looks like we're good.
Just a quick one, sorry, from Junior Komalo again from Newsroom Africa. The last time the IAC spoke to us, they indicated that they were in engagements with the president in terms of when the elections might be. Are those engagements still ongoing? Any indication? Because the IEC had said that it wants the elections to be as soon as possible. Any indications in terms of when we might know when the elections are going to be?
All right, at the back, do I have got any other questions? Are we good? Looks perfect. Okay. May I allow the CEO and Commissioner Love to deal with the questions? Commissioner Love?
Thanks very much. So a couple of things. First of all, with regard to the different court cases that Natasha, that you raised, there is still, let me start there, a case that is before the Constitutional Court, which deals with the signature requirement for unrepresented parties. The Commission has put forward a decision to abide, but has also given an explanatory affidavit just in terms of some of the issues. To our knowledge, the different parties have all indicated a willingness to abide, and the court now has the opportunity to decide 2 things. One is to decide whether or not it believes it can process or is willing to process the matter on the basis of urgency. That is in the hands of the court. And if it does so, hopefully that decision will be made on an urgent, issued urgently too. And then secondly, to decide on, the basis of law and its considerations, how it wishes to proceed. The platform is definitely still open for parties to be able to engage, but of course many of the different parties will start to work with the platform closer, I imagine, to the time when the date for actually registering their decision to be contesting is published in the electoral timetable following proclamation. With regard to the case concerning the trademark of Umkhonto we Sizwe as a name, the case is before the High Court, and the Commission is not directly impacted in that particular case. The case that is before the case that would deal with the issues to do with the Electoral Court is the issue about whether or not the decision that was made to accept the registration was made, is something that ought to be reviewed by the court. And essentially, the matter revolves around the procedures that are required in the Electoral Commission Act, whereby a party that wants to register must publish certain information in the Government Gazette. And during the period of 2 weeks that it is published in the Gazette, anybody has the opportunity to object, and those objections have to be taken into consideration. If there is no objection, the Commission has to apply its mind as to whether or not the name, the logo, the abbreviation, or anything really similar to those three exists. And then it has to apply its mind to ensure that the Constitution is not discriminatory. And then it has to take on board some of the administrative information, which is not published in the Gazette, but is administrative information that is needed, such as the address, the party officials, the leader of the party, and also the signatories. So that is what's before the court. The Commission is of the view that there was full compliance and the appeal does not have standing. But we will see what the court decides. With regard to the issue about the number of people who are estimated to be living abroad and relative to the number of people who have registered to vote, why have they not? I think there's a combination of reasons. I think, first of all, there are a number of people who are not feeling as actively involved, and so maybe have not been fully touched by the increased interest that we've seen within the country. Some of the people are not are in a position where they access the embassy and consular facilities very easily and are not yet familiar with the online portal. And so we are very keen that they continue to register using the online portal. And there are some people who genuinely, although they retain a connection as South Africans, really have engaged themselves in their new homes and really are not as touched and committed to the voting experience. We believe that it's important not just for the Commission, but as we've said before, for all of the stakeholders, including yourselves as the media, to encourage any eligible voter to register, because as we know, once proclamation is published, there is very little time, hours actually, for people to register. And if you're not registered and you decide after that time, you will not be able to vote. So we really do encourage people to vote. We ask all stakeholders, contestants, political parties, the media, families, to really encourage people to vote. And I think really a different, but with some similarities, exists in relation to your question around the 27 million relative to the eligible, the number of eligible voters. There are a number of people who, and particularly young people who are very active, but who have experienced or who have not experienced circumstances of political leadership, that they have confidence that voting is a way that they can express their views and their political aspirations. We regret that, and we think as part of voter education, it's important for people to take every opportunity to be participating in the making of their surroundings and their society. And voting is a very important mechanism, even if we accept that it might be a mechanism in addition to many others. What you call the mushrooming of political parties, and I'm going to link this to the question about how many independent candidates. At this stage, we have a number of political parties who have registered in a fashion that would make them eligible to contest for positions in the national and provincial legislatures. And as we know, the legislation allows for independent candidates to contest as independent candidates for seats in the provincial and regional seats in the National Assembly. That said, we don't know how many of those potential political parties or potential candidates will actually register. So that is not something we know. We will only know that at the time that the date, which will be proclaimed as part of the electoral timetable, has come and gone for contestants to finalize their registration. Of course, if the number of potential contestants, registered contestants, increases, it does create a number of complexities, including things like the length and the layout of the ballot paper. And that's not just complexities for the Commission, which are impacted. There are also, for the Commission, logistical issues, the number of ballot boxes and so on. But also for voters, there is complexity as to how to navigate with numerous contestants. So yes, there is an impact. How great that impact will be remains to be seen. The engagements that we've had with the President, we have, I think our discussions have from our side reached a point where it's not so much that the Commission was advocating any specific date. The Commission was making itself and is ready, as it needs to be, for the earliest possible date. But that is because this is not our decision. We have engaged with the President. We have explained implications that would be present in relation to the earliest date and to later dates. But ultimately, we believe that we have given the President as much information and assurance as has been requested, and now the decision will rest with the President in consultation with the premiers. I hope that I've dealt with the different questions. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Love. Colleagues, we've got all sorts of platforms for any other follow-up questions. We're on WhatsApp, we're on email, like we always do. Thank you very much for coming to the Electoral Commission. Lots of work out there. In the morning, we're at Correctional Services with the CEO, just doing oversight of how South Africans are registering, and also our officials. So definitely, it's a good vibe. I agree. Outside there, South Africans are ready to register to vote. Let's make it count this weekend. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen from the media. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming through. Cheers and goodbye.